Welcome to Unshakable with Human Design, the show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs use human design to shift from hustle to flow without sacrificing results. Come here to become an unshakable human and build an unshakable business according to your human design. I'm your host, Nicole Luna. Hello and welcome to Unshakable with Human Design, everybody. It is our March transit episode, and I am so happy to be joined by my good friend, Christina Luna. Hello, Christina. How are you?
Hey, I am so good. And again, I feel so much bubbles of excitement every time we start these podcasts. They're so much fun.
I feel like we've found our groove where I really look forward to these episodes because I learn something. I know our listeners really, really love these episodes, so I'm happy that it's being received well, but I also really enjoy doing these. I like having company. Like, it's nice to not do the show by myself or interviews where they're about another topic. It's so nice to have a conversation about such a sister topic, like how our human design and astrology really do just go together, because even like we've been talking about before we started recording and in the past, it's like we're talking about the same things different ways. So yeah. I think that that's such an interesting way to approach this, that you bring something to it and I bring something to it, and hopefully everybody's taking away something really interesting and thought-provoking and something that they can use. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about March. There's some fun, interesting stuff going on in March. And we try to save the magic for you guys. We try to not talk too much before we hit record. But I did want to just sort of drop something with her, because I said, we were talking about, I'm like, are you seeing like all of these? I'm like, I think in astrology, you'd call them conjuncts, but where you're just seeing like the same repeating, like planets just in the same space, all like on top of each other. And you are, because we're looking at the same stuff. We're just looking at them differently. I'm looking at it from a gate perspective. So I look at it from a gate perspective where I'm like, oh, it's in like the exact same gate. So to me, it's that gates theme. And for you, you're looking at it slightly different. You're looking at the degrees. So I think a fun way to kick off this month's call would be to sort of, for you to talk about what conjuncts mean from your perspective and from the work that you do. So as we're going into this, and we're going to talk about all of these positions that line up so closely, what does that mean overall for like in a practical way for people?
Wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, when I was preparing for this episode, I circle conjunctions because they help me to understand. A conjunction has a different sensation than something that's in opposition, something that's in a square, something that's in a harmonious trine. A conjunction is an amplification of certain combinations of energy. And so it's really important to know what kind of conjunctions we have in our own charts. And it's important to know when we're going to be experiencing a month with so many conjunctions, because that's how we know that there are a lot of ripe fruit for the month. And we were talking a little bit about how the specificity of the conjunctions, when you see it, it's very, very specific. It's a specific moment. And in astrology, we have specificity as well, but we give these conjunctions something called an orb, a 3-degree range before the conjunction and 3 degrees after. Some astrologers give an even broader, wider perspective, but I have a way of perceiving it as like fruit ripening on a tree. You know, there are certain fruits like apples that take a really long time to ripen, and they can pretty much be pulled from the tree and eaten a little bit before ripeness, during ripeness, and a little bit after. And you're pretty much going to get a solid apple regardless of how broad of a range you're eating it, right? A little bit tart on one side, a little bit bruised on the other side. But then there's fruits like avocados, where if you don't get it at the exact ripe moment, you miss it and it's wasted and it's ruined. And there are transits this month. Some of them feel like apples and some of them feel like avocados. They're very, very specific, acute, and you want to eat it right when it's time to eat it, or else you're going to miss it. And I'm not trying to create like astrology FOMO, but literally, I was in a conversation before you and I talked about how the astrology feels like it's really setting us up to just wake up every moment and say, what's real now? What's right in front of me right now? Like, is there a ripe experience right now? And can I just allow those ripe experiences to arrive rather than thinking I have to make it happen? It feels like we're in a fated time where the things are already planted. All the trees are about to produce all the fruit. We don't have to put more energy into toiling. It's not a time for planting. It's a time for basically collecting all of the emotional fruits of our labor from the past zodiacal year. And so there's a lot on the tree this month.
So I want to just sort of call out, we are, at the time of recording this, we're at February 19th right now. So we're almost 2 months into the year. Can we just talk about how the energy feels like it's been moving this year? I have felt like I feel like there's fruit ripening. I feel like there's the energy's moving quickly right now. I feel like we've picked up some steam, particularly in the month of February, where it's been like a bit of a roller coaster, honestly. And now we're in Pisces season, correct? We're heading into Pisces season now, and we have these fruit ripening moments. Do we want to call out maybe what are the avocados? What are the ones that are like, this is going to be like this fleeting moment in time? Because I'm curious if what you see as an avocado, if it's something that I circled on my stuff. So tell me where you see the avocados.
I feel like the avocado moments are with the really fast moving planets like Mercury, the moon, the sun. Like an avocado moment for the sun is like pretty much a day long. So you have a whole day to eat that avocado. Mercury moments can be like even faster, honestly. Moon moments are really fast. So the avocado moments are going to be, we have 2 eclipses in March. We've got the lunar eclipse in Virgo. It's the first Virgo eclipse that we're going to have for this eclipse cycle. We've got the last Aries solar eclipse in March as well. That's on the 29th. So those 2 moments are avocado moments. And as a collective, we get that. Like eclipses are one of the most like socially popular types of astrology that we experience. Everyone talks about it, even if they're not into astrology. And so those are avocado moments, and they're very popular.
The lunar eclipse, that's on the 13th? Is that the 13th,
the lunar
14th?
eclipse is on the 14th.
14th.
Yep.
And that's a blood moon? Are we a blood moon? Is that what that is this month?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I think blood moons have something to do with the space of how far the moon is from the earth in relationship to all of this. Like the blood moon is like basically you're seeing a whole sunrise, or sunset sunrise reflected onto the moon because of the space of how close it is. For me, that's not something that I track, but it is the Virgo eclipse. And I'm definitely tracking it because I believe it's going to give us our first really clear lesson plan for what this 18-month release cycle is all about. So for me, I'm paying close attention to it so that I can really work with the energy of releasing of Virgo things.
So talk to me about how you pay attention to something like the Virgo energy. So what you know is that these eclipses are going to set us up and because it's a particular type of eclipse, you're saying that there will be releasing, there's going to be letting go of things. So what are you watching out for? What are you paying attention to in order to how I hate to say use this energy, but how do we learn from the lessons that we're given? How are we making the most of the energy that's here? How are you approaching that?
I love that question. There are a couple of things that I actually highlighted that we should look at that because it's going to come back on this day, and we're being set up with the prequel. Then we get to have the actual real deal, and then we get the sequel. And so the way I look at keeping an eye on is I'm paying really close attention to the themes that are evolving in my own life, and I will go back in time for this eclipse cycle and for Pisces season. I am looking back at September because September we had a full moon eclipse in Pisces. So there was something going on for me during September that planted certain seeds for what I'm harvesting now. And these are long cycles. So I'm looking at the themes, I'm taking an inventory, I'm looking back at my journaling, and I'm like, okay, this is what I was going through. This is how I was feeling. How did that evolve through the last 6 months? Where am I now from then? And what kinds of ways would this naturally evolve to create even greater sustainability for me? I'm asking that question because Uranus is trying to create sustainability in our lives on the long haul. So I'm asking, how will this become more sustainable? I'm basically asking, how can I bring myself into even greater wholeness at this time? So that means I need to find places where I'm still working on it. I'm still not like feeling like it's all the way my insides are matching my outsides, or that's not all the way like coherent with my life right now. So it's in the works. So really you kind of have to know which time frame you're going to peer in on, and then how that time frame has developed and manifested over the last little bit of time. But on a shorter scale, if we just look at the month of March, for instance, we'll have a couple of repeated transits because we have two planets moving retrograde in March. We have Venus and Mercury moving retrograde in March. In fact, at the moment of hearing this podcast, we will have had a week of all the planets being direct the last week of February. From the 23rd to the 1st of March. 23rd is when Mars moves direct to the 1st of March. All the planets are direct. So we'll have this one little week period of time where all the planets were direct, and hopefully we all used that time to kind of make some plans. Like to see, all right, this is the way I want to be moving in the world. This is how I believe I can move forward. And if we really looked at it from a perspective of like, I'm getting this plan, not because I'm going to be able to make forward momentum right now, but because now that I know that that's how I want to move, I want to make sure I fix and like unweave and reweave and rework and retool these couple places of my life to position me for all this forward momentum. So then we use the month of March to reposition so that we can really feel the forward momentum once everything's moving direct again.
When are those retrogrades happening? So we have Mercury and Venus going retrograde. At what point?
Venus will begin her retrograde on the 1st of March, and Mercury will begin its retrograde on the 15th.
Okay.
And they're going to kind of dance with each other in the same space in Aries. So there's a lot. Before we started recording this, I said, listen, everyone's going to have two specific parts of their life that are going to be playing off of each other. It's a polarity point in our lives. And so it's going to be really important to know where the Aries part of our life, the Pisces Aries kind of point is in our life, because there's a lot of adjustments happening in that part of our life right now. And those adjustments are going to position us just right for us to be really expanding in the other half of our life, in the other side of it. And so for me, this is happening in my home, like the place where it's at the core of me. So it's like, I probably need to be looking at adjustments that'll create greater sustainability in my home and in my body and in my health. And if I make those adjustments now, it's going to position me to be able to hold a high level of growth and expansion on the other side of my world, which is about my career and legacy and impact in the world. Really exciting stuff. And where I essentially want to be expanding is in that area. But if I focus on really getting the adjustment right in the bottom part of my chart, it'll really position me properly for that growth. So as I'm moving through this, I'm looking at, okay, where are the key moments where I'm probably going to need to make some decisions about my home and my health and my family. And so I'm keeping an eye on these specific dates because the theme will be introduced at the first crossover. It'll probably come to some kind of understanding or resolution at the second crossover. And then at the third crossover, I'll have the solution and be actively initiating it.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment, thank you for that. I want to take a moment to just kind of go back to what you're talking about, that you want expansion in your career, in your legacy, in your impact, in your work. And what you're looking at is the polarity of that if I create stability in my home, if I work on that, I will get the expansion that I want in my business. I just wanted to point out that holistic sort of perspective that you have on your business and how I think people are coming around to that. I think that's why people listen to shows like this. It's because they realize that it's about more than just, like boots on the ground, getting it done, working day and out. I want to expand my business. I've got to work on my business. That it's so much more, that we bring so much, that if our home is off balance, then our business is going to be off balance. And sometimes we have to put attention, love, we have to release, we have to let go of things in other areas in order to have expansion someplace else. And I just wanted to call that out for, if you're listening to this and you've been trying and pushing in a way towards something, and I know it's usually our business that we're doing this, and we're noticing I'm putting it all in, I'm really doing the work, and it's just not paying off, then maybe there's a balance that's off. It's not necessarily that you're not working hard enough there, that's why the inner work is so important. That's why listening to ourselves and following our intuition is important, because I think so many people muffle that voice or silence that voice that says you have to work on yourself, or you have to, you need to release something, or you need this type of work or this type of help in your life. And you say, no, it doesn't fit my plan. It doesn't logically make sense. So we stop and we don't listen to our intuition. And I think that's what's holding a lot of people back, is they're worried, I won't get the ROI on this thing that feels really right, so I'm going to go and get another strategy. It often doesn't serve. So I love that. Of course you look at it this way, but I wanted to call that out because I know that sometimes people need to hear that this is what actually works for people. For some reason, they hear it and they don't really believe it. So I wanted to reiterate that expansion in one area can cause expansion in another area. So we're holistic beings. We're not one-dimensional.
Absolutely. There are only 6 primary polarities in our lives. So, there's only really 6 areas of life. They're just 2 sides of the same coin. And oftentimes we don't understand how these 2 sides of the coin are related to each other sometimes. Like, there's a lot of platitudes in the field. Like, if you want to love another person, you got to love yourself. Well, that's literally 2 sides of the same coin. And if we're experiencing something in the mirror that's not working well, but we keep trying to adjust the mirror, usually it's the other side of the polarity that the adjustment can actually take place. And we all kind of get these platitudes. We get like the stereotype of this, but in practice, what does that actually freaking mean? And, I kind of feel like astrology does give a really practical map of what that actually means in literal life. And sometimes it's counterintuitive. Like, everyone wants to know how they can impact more people. Like, but do you know the opposite side of impacting more people is literal play and joy? Like personal pleasure, play, and joy. If you want to impact more people, you actually have to work on the pleasure and personal process of experiencing pleasure to a higher degree. Because if you sacrifice that for impact, it's draining all the energy out of both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And, those platitudes, those things that we hear over and over again, the only thing I can do for you is work on myself. The only thing I can do for me is work on myself. We hear these things, but I think that advice can sometimes be hard to follow because it doesn't necessarily line up logically with what we want. And how often does what you want get in the way of you getting what you want? I think that's a really common thing that I see with people. And we all have our ways. Astrology is a tool that you can use. Human design is a tool that you can use because it is about understanding where you need to lean in and where you need to lean back. And that balance is where we find the magic, the real magic. And if you can't experience pain, you can't experience joy. If you can't, all of these things that we hear, we have to live them. And hopefully these conversations help people live them a little bit more. But go ahead.
Just before we close out this conversation about polarity and like the 2 different sides, the literal work of the next 18 months, we're in Pisces season now. This is where the nodes are. This is where the evolution is. And so we can actually really feel into this moment. Do you know what this side of the polarity is about? It's about trusting unseen forces. It's about increasing faith. So Pisces season is one side of a polarity that says nothing is actually in your control. Everything is fated. Everything's destiny. There's an invisible weaver that's putting it all together. You don't have a lot of control over it. This is Pisces. The other side of that is Virgo. And Virgo is you're an individual person. You've got a will, an identity, an ego, an individuated desire and state. And what you put into your own human hands manifests in real life. Like, okay, how opposite are these two sides of a polarity? You know, recently I've been watching this content creator who's talking about the role of human creators. Like, what's our role as human creators? And he was so brilliant. He said, he brought up a proverb, and he said, you know, I'm not going to quote him right because I can't remember, but the whole thing was, what would you rather eat? Would you rather eat wheat or cake?
Yeah.
And he's explaining that wheat is created, it's the raw material that's created by the creator, by the earth. And cake is how it moves through the human hands to manifest something even more pleasurable. And so this polarity is about understanding where the wheat is coming from. The harvest that we're having right now is the wheat. We get to then bring that wheat in, experience the wheat, and transform it into something human that's been through our vessel, that's transformed through our human experience with it. And so the things that are going to be conjuncting and ripening are going to be literally like avocados. You can eat an avocado raw, but what if you combine it with a few elements and make guacamole? I mean, that's
so
glorious.
much better.
Yeah. So we're kind of in a moment where, yeah, take the raw transit, take the raw energy, but alchemize it through your human experience. Alchemize the raw emotion, alchemize the raw circumstance. Use your own meaning maker to create something magical and unique that never would have been created if you hadn't put your attention and focus onto it.
I love that. You're starting to get to like what I try to do all the time with human design, which is speak about like, hey, actually, it is how you use this information, but it's not using it like people tend to, oh, I'm going to go use this energy. It's how you process it. It's how you internalize it, how you move with it, and what you make out of it. So even like in human design, we obviously conscious sun is a very big focus for us. That's like when I teach business by human design, it's your brand. And as we're going through these transits, we're talking about from the human design side, what we focus on in these episodes are the sun gates. And we touch on some other things, and you bring a lot of other color with the other planets are doing during the month. But when we go through the sun gates, they all have an earth gate. And that's the conscious sun matters. That's the light you're here to shine. But it is balanced by the earth gate, which is the polarity from what Christina was just saying, that polarity of Pisces and Virgo. That's what we're going to be going through. So every sun gate that I mentioned that we talk about in this episode, there is an earth gate that sits in Virgo. That is its polarity that is pulling down from it. So when we start the month, we start off in gate 63, the gate of doubt. This is my land. This is my conscious earth is the sun now. So this is my polarity on the 1st of March because the 64 is my conscious sun. And that was what the earth will be in. So I feel like it's almost like my inner world becomes my action at this time. It's like I feel very energized by this energy, I think, because we're in our polarity right now. It's personal to us. So there's the stuff that we're talking about from this broad perspective, but you can be taking your chart, you can be taking your birth chart from astrology, you could be taking your human design chart, and you can be interpreting this for yourself and noticing what your polarity is. So if you are an Aries, are you a Libra polarity, then that would be the correct polarity, right? So I'm not giving people the wrong information. So as you're going through this, like ask yourself these questions so you can start to understand, well, what's the balance that is I'm cosmically aligned with? Because I feel like my whole life has been a balance of the two themes of Pisces and Virgo. I feel like those are the biggest themes in my life. Those are also my nodes as well. Weirdly, the nodes that are in these positions right now. So it feels like a weirdly special time for me. But let's take everybody through some of these. Let's go through, maybe we'll go through week by week and just talk about some of the things that we're seeing, and we can call out what is happening. So in that first week, I always find this interesting because Pisces is known to be this, it's a spiritual sign, right? Like that's kind of how it's seen, is that, believing in the unseen. what I think is interesting is it opens up in the month of March in the human design gate, which is the gate of doubt, which sits on the logical side of the human design chart. It is about scientifically questioning things, doubting, but in a way to figure out the program, figure out the problem, figure out the pattern is really what it's doing. It's inspiration, but it's saying like it doubts in like a scientific way where it's an inquiring mind, I think is how I would maybe put it. That it's asking better questions gets you better answers. But I think Pisces gives it another, because you might read that and you might get a certain idea of what it means. But when you put the Pisces spin on it, when you put that theme above it, it's like, it really gives you the essence of what this is, that it isn't about necessarily having to prove every single thing, that some things are not proven. And sometimes it's just about asking better questions to get the better answer that's right for you in that moment. And can you inquire by saying, I love to put it like, it's like, what if this happened? It's playing with possibility rather than the shadow of it, which is to doubt and to shut the door on everything because it's, oh, that can't happen, that won't happen. And that's the shadow of this. How are you seeing that first week of the month?
I actually have a really clear metaphor for this whole month, and I can buzz through it like super quickly, but if I just share this one like cultural metaphor.
Sure.
Basically, this month feels a lot like the final like climax of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And so I want to break that down because I see Pisces season as where we get to find the Holy Grail, like our personal Holy Grail. And what do we do with it? So let's take like the way that movie, the final scene kind of plays out. Basically, like the last week of February was the 10 of Cups, where we finally reached where the Grail is being held. Okay, so within all of us, we finally have reached the space where we know we've got to go in there and we're going to find the Grail. But the first week of March is the Knight of Cups. It's where, man, Indy has to go through all of these trials, and there's doubt, there's fear. He has to face his faith. You know, it's like where he puts his leg up and he like steps into the freaking, you know, and the ground is there. So he faces those fears and those doubts. So that gate you're talking about around like challenging the doubts, why would he go in there though? Why would we face the doubts? We face the doubts because his father was shot, and he knows that the Holy Grail that will save his father is somewhere in there. So it's a worthy mission for him to go into the temple of the Grail to find it for his father. So we need to be asking ourselves, first of all, what have we surfaced is our worthy reason for why we would face our doubts and step into the temple to find the Grail? So that's the first question, and that's the question we answer like the last week of February. The first week of March is, what trials and tribulations on our path to finding faith? What are the pitfalls of finding faith within us that we will face in order to get to where the Grail is? So that's the first week of March. The second week of March is when we're choosing the Grail. So he makes it into the Grail temple, right? And there's all of these cups to choose from. The consequences are dire. You know, he drinks the wrong Grail and he literally like turns into a like emaciated skeleton, right? So he's got to ask himself which one of these is actually the Grail. So I believe that week between the 9th and the 15th, we're asking ourselves, what really is the cup of life that we drink from in this lifetime for us? There could be many, many cups to choose from, but we find within our heart, like he chooses with his heart, that's the cup of the carpenter, right? He knows it with his heart. He has full faith. He reaches for the cup, he fills it up with water, and he drinks it. So we have that the 9th through the 15th. Then we have the King of Cups. The King of Cups is when we know we're holding the Grail, we know what it is, and now we know how we're going to take that Grail out into the world and serve from it. So it's like we've finished something. So he takes the cup out and he gives it to his father and pours it over his father's gunshot wound, and he heals, right? So this is kind of the metaphor for the way we take our personal Grail into the world. And then that last week is, well, what happens as a result of finally achieving the Grail? Like, what's the new reality now that we know that the Grail magic exists? And so we answered that question that very last week of March. And it actually starts a whole new cycle where Neptune moves into Aries, and we literally don't have to have faith in the Grail anymore. Can you imagine, like, within the paradigm of Indiana Jones, does the Grail even exist is a question that the entire movie answers. Now we don't have to ask the question anymore. We know the Grail exists. We don't have to prove it to ourselves. So what's the new reality now that that's been proven? So there's a personal journey for every single one of us through the month of March where we get to answer that with our life.
Well, first of all, I am always game for an 80s movie reference to explain just about anything. So thank you for that. I love, like, what is my Grail? I'm going to be asking myself that for the rest of the week. And you're like, what is my Grail? What is my Holy Grail? Or do I have to do I just let it unfold and let it come to me? I wanted to just sort of call out a couple of things that were even happening in that first couple of days. You know, we talked about the doubt. Then that second week, we go into what is called it's the gate of openness. It's an emotional gate. It's the gate of grace, to have grace or to not have grace. So even from your Indiana Jones reference, in that choosing, are you choosing from a frantic place where you're not making the choice that really feels right to you? That second week is gate 22, which it's so much about feeling. It's about feeling and trusting what you feel is what you know. You don't need anything more than that. And when you trust that, this is part of the cross of rulership. And so the incarnation cross of rulership. And one of the core lessons of that, you know, we're talking about ruling, we're talking about who's in charge. People with rulership usually have issues with power struggles and things like that, not either themselves or in their life. And, you know, what the 22nd gate teaches us, and the 47th gate is the polarity to it, that Ra said that rulers need to be good listeners. And they listen to themselves and they listen to their intuition, and they're not fighting for their own emotional needs. They're coming at it from a clean place, and then they're listening to the people around them. I think there's a call to grounding really here in that second week of really trusting yourself. And then that third week where we go into the 36th gate, what I wanted to call out here is we're going to have the sun in 36. The North Node will also be in 36. So that's one of those moments that, at least from my perspective, I'm like, oh, look at that. From like the 13th to the 17th, I think there's this, you know, little tower going on between the North Node and the sun. And I'm curious. So this is gate 36 is the gate of crisis. That's what it's called in human design. I don't particularly love that name. It's called the darkening of the light. My perspective on this, and I've talked about it quite a bit on the show just because it's come up in conversation and it's also part of my own design. But the 36th gate to me, crisis to me, is that it's also known as, I think the gift in Gene Keys is compassion. And boy, do I feel like we need a call to compassion at this moment in the world. So maybe this is bringing this energy in to hopefully bring out the best in us and not the fearful crisis side of things. But it's almost like, I look at it like, if you've gone through crisis, if you've lived life and had experiences, you have compassion for the fact that other people have life experiences and go through all sorts of ups and downs. If you're somebody who understands this energy, then you're able to understand that life doesn't move in a straight upward trajectory, that there are ups and downs, hills and valleys, and it's all beautiful. And that the experience of life is to be able to look at other people and have compassion for their ups and downs in life and for where they are as well. That I think there's a great potential for empathy in truly both of those gates, the 22nd gate that's the week before, and then the 36th gate as well. We're in the emotional center for both of them. And just this, I think there's also a feeling and a perspective, it's grounded by the 6th gate, which is conflict. So if you think about crisis and conflict and how crisis and conflict can beget more crisis and conflict brings more crisis, so we have more conflict and then we have more crisis. But if you can, the 6th gate, I just did an episode on this about the 6th gate and diplomacy. That's the gift of it. It's diplomacy and compassion are the gifts of these. And so to me, that's something that I can't not see when I see those gates. And I think we actually, even on the 16th and 17th, we have Saturn being thrown in there too, right? We have Sun, North Node, and Saturn in. Is that for your calculations? Do you see the same thing?
Yes, they're very close. The sun comes into a conjunction with Saturn on the 12th, and they pretty much stay pretty close together all the way through. They're within orb, and the sun actually does that conjunction with the North Node on the 17th. And so your timing is exactly what I'm seeing as well, and it spans through the time of the eclipse in Virgo and Mercury's retrograde. And on the note, before you move into that like last little piece, this other piece about compassion that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know that there's a rule in the universe that says that we get to experience what we judge. And you're talking about compassion and diplomacy. And if we get to experience what we judge, the reason we would do that is so that we could gain compassion. But this does create a crisis moment when we experience what we judge. There's a crisis in our consciousness when we become the exact thing that we've judged, and it breaks the spell of judgment, and it does create greater compassion. And then we do move with more diplomacy because we are no longer judging harshly out of, I guess, lack of experience, lack of compassion, lack of experience with that thing that we're judging. So it does look like things are coming to a head in that moment.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about what a conjunction in that conjunct from, so we had Sun, North Node, Saturn, and do we have Venus in there at some point too, or no? Oh no, Venus will be, you said Venus is retrograde at that point?
Venus and Mercury have a conjunction on the 11th, and they're in Aries.
Yes.
So they're it depends on how wide of a window we're looking at here. I mean, all of it's pretty conjunct. All of it's very close together. All of it's in the mix. But I think that the mix or the soup that we're having here is, gosh, can you allow your judgment to attract the exact circumstances that are the keys to unlock your greatest level of compassion? And that will be our evolutionary point. The North Node is where we're evolving. The Sun is what we're conscious of. We're consciously evolving through Saturn, circumstances that are very grounded in the 3D. Circumstances that are grounded and tangible in the 3D that are kind of suspending our focus and our consciousness, at least, in a moment where we've really got to look at all sides of this equation so that we can see that what we judge, we are, so that we can understand and have compassion to release ourselves from the magnetism that judgment brings. Basically, anything we push far away from ourselves is getting snapped back at us really strongly right now. So we're going to pay attention to any like pushing away energy, and we're going to have to really be right front and center with all the snapback in that moment. So I see this being a really karmic time.
Yeah. Yes, that's a word for it. Yeah, for sure.
We necessarily have to like fear, but one that if we can, season ourselves in advance for a meaty experience that
Yeah. Well, I think if we look at one of the things that I'm always saying I say it like daily to my clients, they're tired of hearing it, but I say triggers are gifts. And I say, if you're looking closely enough at the world around you and you really pay attention to everything that's coming your way, the things that bother you, the things that you judge, and you're noticing the things that go wrong in your life, and you're taking radical responsibility for your role in them, not in a way where you're casting blame on yourself, you're not criticizing yourself, but you're curious. Curiosity over criticism. If you're looking at it that way, you will solve the problems of your life very quickly. You'll see yourself evolve. You'll see yourself grow. But if you keep looking at it like, damn the man, circumstances again, here I go, I can't get ahead in life. Every time I try to do something, something knocks me down, then you're twisted up in the game and you're not seeing how it's played.
I mean, just think about, I just hope everyone watches Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade one time at least, because think about the moment he brings the Grail back, right? He pours it on his dad's bullet wound, and the dad had faith in something all this time. His entire lifetime was devoted, and his dad got to experience the karma of that belief, right? Well, then you've got the girl who grabs the Grail and she's falling into the hole, right? And Indy has so much compassion for her. And so he's holding her hand and trying to save her. And she's like, I can't reach, I want to reach it. And her reaching causes her to fall in. So then Indy's then in the exact same position, reaching for the Grail. And the father says, Indy, let it go. Yeah. And he almost fell into the karma of the exact same thing that he was judging in the woman who fell in before him. Like, these are the gifts. And hopefully we have like a father archetype in our life right now, like Indy's father, who can, you know, activate inside of our consciousness that says, hey, Christina, let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go. Like,
you don't need it.
Knowing that it's real is enough. You don't need the artifact.
Yeah. You know, I caught some flack for some of the things that I said about Gate 6 and diplomacy and some of the things that we're seeing in the world and some of the things that I think this is kicking up for us. And I was really I did try hard to come from a place of neutrality with it and not because I think that one of the lessons of 36-6, that polarity there, it is about not allowing your own emotions to become so entangled in the thing that your emotional agenda takes over. Can we be neutral? And that's something that I can't help but see everywhere in the world right now, how maybe we need that. And we're about to get it, whether we want it or not. It's coming and it's here, and it's our area for growth because the polarities teach you a lot about the energy, because if you go too far in one direction, you overcorrect. And finding balance where you can be balancing that coin, where you can see both sides of it, that's the game, that's the work. And we get these moments. And when I looked at all of these overlapping energies and how there was so much repeating in the chart over this month, you can't not see that there are lessons coming. Like, as you said, there's karma coming. And like you said, it's not to be a doomsdayer. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means and I think if you have your eyes open, and I think if you look at it with curiosity and not criticism, you will, whether it's a storm or not, you'll be prepared for the weather. You'll be okay. We'll all be okay. And I think we're all being called, I think this time that we're being called to something greater than we've ever been called to before. There is one other thing that I wanted to mention. I don't know how this looks in the astrology, but the 35th gate is where Jupiter is sitting for, a while. Or I think until we're in it definitely through April. But the 35th gate is the harmonic gate to 36. So when the sun is in 36 and the node is in 36 and Saturn goes into 36, we're also in 35. So everybody will have the channel of transitoriness. This is a manifestor channel. The 35-36 channel does bring crisis in pursuit of progress. And so that could be either a very productive time for people where there might be a lot of energy that you're able to channel into progress if you've been doing work for a while. I think that this is really empowering energy. It's manifestor energy. It's get it done energy. It's actually seeing movement. But what type of movement that is, I think, gets predicated on what energy are you in when you take it. Is it from an emotionally unstable place, or from feeling like I need to have progress, so I'm going to force it, I'm going to push it, I'm going to make it happen? It's like this needle that you're trying to thread here of allowing and recognizing that you take leaps, but you can't force progress. You can't, and without breaking a lot and causing crisis. So I think we might see quite a bit of both. We might see some crisis. We might see some breaking things in the name of progress. And some of that might be good. Some of it may not be very good. And then some of it in your own life, you might be seeing, these are gates for me, like these knockoff things in my chart. So I'm absolutely looking at them and recognizing that, I do feel like I can move now, but I also have to be able to roll with punches too, because I know that with progress, the road can be bumpy. It's never totally smooth. So I just wanted to call that out, that everybody will have that channel while the sun is in 30s. Well, we all have it because it's in the nodes, but we're going to have it major during the week of the 13th. That will be a big, big energy for everybody. And then you go ahead.
I just wanted to say something about like ultimately what Jupiter's asking us to do in Gemini, in these latter degrees of Gemini, while they're in a kind of square to all the action over here in Pisces, right? Jupiter's going to move into Cancer this year in just a couple of months. So what it's doing while it's in Gemini is asking us to rewrite the story we're telling about everything. So there's a new like blueprint for how our mind is making meaning about everything. So it's a really beautiful time to kind of scramble the old story in a certain way so that you can write the new story more consciously. And similarly to how, gosh, if there was a Grail you've had faith in your whole life and then you found it, it probably would mean that you can start telling a new story. Your story is not about proving the Grail. Your story is now that the Grail is real. What's the story now? And how will you use the power to create that story moving forward? So there is a pretty strong Jupiter influence that is going to be a byproduct of everything that we process through in the month of March.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'd rather have a lot happening than nothing happening. So I'm excited for all of this, but it'll be interesting. We never know exactly what's coming. And then moving toward the end of the month, we close out the month we go through quite a few gates actually in the sun. We go through the 25th gate, and that's at the equinox, which it always is. It's one of our love gates. It's universal love. It is that. So if you have gate 51 in your chart, you're going to have some big energy because that's going to complete that channel for you. But the 25th gate, it's universal love. It is spirituality. It is the gate of that type of harm to you is harm to me. We are all one. It is one consciousness. It's the gate of the priest and priestess. So I think that's an energy, and we see that Venus is in that gate at the same time. So we're getting a lot of, at least in from the human design perspective, those overlap in that we're talking about from the 19th to the 24th.
22nd.
Yeah, to 23rd is what I have on my chart. But yeah, and then we go into 17, the gate of opinions, always an interesting and dangerous potentially place. Where are your opinions coming from is always what I say to people when they have 17. Where do your opinions come from? Where have they been formulated from? Pay attention to, if you have an open ajna, where are you formulating? Where are you getting your information? What are you allowing into your head? Because a lot can make its way in there. And if you have a defined ajna, how firm are you in those opinions? And can you maybe reanalyze them and be invited back to say, where did this come from? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to keep this way of thinking? We have all of this time to be, changing things and evolving and coming at things from greater compassion. Does that cause us to maybe change some of the opinions that we've been holding for a while? And maybe ask ourselves, are these our own or do they belong to somebody else? Because if you have an open ajna, it's so easy for people to plant ideas in our minds. And it's a regular process of cleaning it out and saying, like, where did that come from anyway? Do I still believe that, even if it came from you? Do I still want to carry that? Is that still an opinion I want to hold? Does that still feel true to me? They don't have to be there forever, and they can absolutely change. How are you seeing the closeout of the month?
I love what you said about opinions, and this is where we have that first week of Aries. It's brand new. It's the freshest part of the individuation process, and opinions are like a personal guiding principle. Like opinions are one side of an equation and universal truth is the other side, right? Our opinion is the like personal universal truth for us in that one moment with all of our life experiences and preferences and personal identity and original thought, etc. It's like very, very, very personal. And it's always evolving. Like every single moment, our opinion evolves slightly and is influenced by certain things. So it's a very mutable kind of changing experience of thought. And so I think it's kind of beautiful to acknowledge that the opinions we have in that last week are probably very, very, very unique to us, but that's also really important to remember. like everyone has them, and that nobody shares the same 100% opinion of someone else, because we've all had, it's like a fingerprint. They're all very unique. And so opinions can never be right for anyone else. They're always personal and only right in that moment. And so there's a very temporariness and novelty experience of that last week. And if we can hold it like that, it can feel very exciting. But if we can, kind of take it and try to turn it into rule or, truths for others, that's when all the problems start.
Absolutely. And how you express that opinion. It's sometimes your opinions are to be kept for yourself. And sometimes you feel like you want to share them. And knowing when to do that, I think, is part of like obtained wisdom through lived wisdom through life. When to share and when to maybe let it percolate a little bit more and allow it to change and allow it to evolve and allow it to really come to a point where you feel like, yeah, this is mine, at least for now. So I love all of that. Is there anything that we didn't mention that we feel like we left out that we would be remiss to not mention to our people? Did we prepare them well?
Well, I mean, I could speak probably for hours about the things that are happening in between, but I think that the most important thing to remember is that if we could really own that our reality is very subjective and, kind of feel into the power of our subjectivity. And maybe even ask the question, is there an objective reality at all? And if there is, what parts are objective? I think those are going to be the most interesting questions for us to ask ourselves this entire
That was
month.
a very Pisces question, I feel. I feel like that was a very existential, is there an objective reality or is it all subjective? And I think that is a great question because I think, aren't we always playing with those two things of there's the reality that we all see and we agree upon, but there's also the one that's very personal to us that's completely subjective. And the more we change the subjective in our favor and start to shift the way that we perceive things and what we consider reality, the more we see outer reality change. I think that's a fun one to turn over in our minds this month and to play with in our energy. So thank you for that. I think that's a great reflection to leave everybody with. And thank you for staying to the end of this episode with us. Christina, where can they stay in touch with you? I know you're at lunation.live on Instagram. Is there anything that you want to call out that you're doing that you have coming up that you want everybody to know about?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I record quarterly readings for folks. And so I will be opening up the kind of portal for people to sign up for those quarterly readings in the month of March. And I'm also offering a new service where I can answer questions. So people can submit their questions and they will get a period of time with me live to get those questions answered based specifically on their chart. So it's a new service I'm providing starting in the month of March. I'm just launching it. I'm going to really be putting it out into the public in April. So listeners of this podcast actually get kind of a sneak peek into that new offering, and I'm excited about it. Yeah,
that's really fun. I love that offer. I think that sounds amazing. How do they find out more about that? Do they go to your website? Do they watch you on Instagram? Where do they find out more?
Yeah, please find me on Instagram. Everything that you need to know will be at the Instagram bio site location, right?
Sweet. So she is at lunation.live. We'll link it up in the show notes as always. And then we have, at the time of this, we will actually be kicking off our Authority Accelerator Masterclass on March 3rd. So the day that this airs, you will be able to join us if you want. So please go to nicoleleno.com/masterclass if you want to join us there and register. It's totally free. Or go to my Instagram and DM me the word masterclass and we'll register you right there in the DMs like magic. So thanks for being here. We appreciate you. And remember, in order to have an unshakable business, you must first become an unshakable human. So thanks for letting us help you become unshakable with human design, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
If you love this episode and you're a fan of the show, please show us the love on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to the show and leave us a review. And if you'd like to connect with other entrepreneurs on their human design journey, join our free Facebook community, Human Design for Entrepreneurs. Go to nicoleleno.me/podcast links to join the group, book a human design reading with me, or access our free human design resources. We'll see you there.